Hello, I have perfected Helldive on Steam by collecting all 4 achievements. This includes fixing the submarine, activating a generator, turning on my base, and one more we'll touch on a bit later. Welcome to my full review. Helldive is an indie, first-person, psychological, atmospheric horror game being developed and published by Teacup Games. Full disclosure, I was graciously sent a review copy of the game. You can find all the information for you need down below, but with that in mind, it will not be altering my opinions on the title. Starting off with the settings, visually, I love the simplistic aesthetic with the submarine floating in the back. The options only hold your volume and brightness settings. It's quite loud at first, but becomes quieter in-game. As for the brightness, it starts at 0, which should be perfectly fine for playing, however I halved it for recording purposes. The only option I think is missing here is sensitivity. For a first-person game, I would much prefer the option to adjust it rather than having it be forced onto my mouse's DPI. This is not a deal breaker, but the ease of access would be lovely. There's also no controller support or option to change your keybinds. What you see is what you get, but thankfully they're all pretty well mapped. As for Steam Deck compatibility, it is currently unknown. If you give it a try, let us know down below. As for the technical side of things, please note I'm running this off a low to high-end PC, so how this performs for me might not perform the same for you. With that being said, I had no issues whatsoever. The game is incredibly optimized and will probably run off your gamer fridge downstairs with little to no issues. As for the difficulty, there are no options. The difficulty of the game comes with being observant, running from threats, and how you handle inventory management. On the difficulty scale, I'd rate it a solid easy. The hardest part is honestly the resource management, as it feels more required than it actually is. Once you understand the flow, it becomes a breeze. The replayability is quite non-existent, outside of possible missed dialogue, updates, or chasing achievements you may have missed. As for the gameplay, in short, Helldive is a first-person, resource management, generator fueling, walking simulator about exploring deep-sea facilities and reactivating all their systems. Starting from the very beginning, the tutorial starts the moment you awake from your slumber. You'll learn how to drop items, work the submarine, and make your way to the first facility, after which you're completely on your own for the rest. I absolutely love when you can't tell you're in a tutorial. It holds your hand for the first 2 seconds and then constantly pokes you towards your goal without saying or showing a thing. Very well thought out. One of the first things you'll also do is fix a giant hole in your submarine. I thought this was a pretty cool mechanic, however it only appears if you crash. Not to humble brag, but I never crashed during my first playthrough, so the only time I seen this mechanic was within the first minute of game time. That being said, if you do happen to crash, it becomes a living nightmare. Your submarine will quickly start flooding, and if you take too long to patch the holes, or your blowtorch runs out of fuel, you'll simply just drown. Game over. I do wish this mechanic was reused during one of the facilities, as I hated carrying around the blowtorch assuming it would, only to be wasting my time and inventory slot. As for the tools, the game loves to tell you they're required, but won't tell you what specific tool is needed. While they're all fairly obvious, like a fuel can for generators, and typically all found close by, I'm curious to why it just doesn't tell you the name of the item required. I guess it doesn't really need to as it has enough visual clues, but if you've never played this sort of game before, I can see players becoming confused and just wandering around not knowing what to do next. Speaking of which, if you are ever stuck, wires are connected to every generator you'll need to fuel, so just look for a wire on the ground and follow it to make progress. The exception to this is finding key cards to open locked doors, as they can sometimes be hard to spot. My tip to you is making sure you look on every shelf possible. As for your inventory, you're stuck with holding a max of 4 items, which you can drop to swap them out at any given time. The game gives off an extraction vibe, which makes all the items seem important to hold on to. However, you'll quickly notice you don't have enough arms or extra room in your submarine. Thankfully, if an item is required during a facility, it will be provided to you somewhere within, rather than having to have obtained it prior. So you don't have to worry about hoarding fuel, for example, unless you crash a lot. While I enjoyed having the side quests in order to find the required items, I think a harder or survival mode where you must stock up and prepare before going into each facility would fit this sort of game perfectly. As for the horror aspect, the game heavily relies on the atmosphere and audio around it, which of course it absolutely nails. It's insanely creepy. I'll also give it bonus points for not using any over-the-top jump scares. I will sadly admit it still made me jump a couple times. Now there are actual creatures that can start chasing you through their environment, however all of them felt extremely avoidable and of little to no threat. I could have got lucky, but this is what made it feel like a walking sim. One mechanic I felt could have been a lot creepier is the cameras inside your submarine. You can even swap between multiple angles, one including your gorgeous self. But they all left me scratching my head as I struggled to find what their intended purpose was. You could stare all day and never see a thing. There seems to be literally no use for them outside of just being there for immersion, which is okay but pretty disappointing. I was at least expecting some random ghost orbs or jump scare, but nope, nothing. Moving to the creepy world of Helldive, visually it's insanely immersive and absolutely nails the low poly aesthetic that many, including myself, love. It's by far the game's strongest suit. Helldive's worlds are split between linear facilities and your submarine's open world, heavily inspired by Iron Lung. As for the travel, the entire game is played on foot. However, you control your submarine by giving it power, controlling it with one hand on 2 levers, and then guiding it through an enclosed sea from a small screen in front of you. When you're close to a facility indicated by its bubble, you'll get a message about the inside before being able to go in from the top hatch. Once inside, you'll traverse the uniquely designed levels in search of the final generator to reactivate the station. As an award, you'll be given a voice memo you must carry back to your sub before being able to listen to it, but I'll touch more on that soon. Overall, I thought the world design was pretty well done, and it's clear a lot of thought was put into it, as almost every room has a clear purpose outside of just exploration. I was quite impressed, and the deeper you go, the creepier it becomes. That in itself has a lot of pull. As for the audio, the majority of it is incredibly well done. While there's no real soundtrack outside of the main menu, it keeps you insanely immersed in the depths by having a lot of spooky ambience tied with your super loud actions. Overall, it's very quiet, but the good spooky kind. The sound effects really make you feel like you're there, not to mention you can see your sexy body. Pipes explode, your loud footsteps echo, and you can even hear the pressure change around you. The psychological horror is truly there. As for the voice acting, it's very strange. When you first spawn, it sounds great. However, after extracting the voice memos back to your submarine and putting them into the machine to listen, I cannot for the life of me tell if this is actually an AI-generated voice or someone attempting to act like an AI reading off of a script.
I'd better make sure Beatrice does not find out.
I love how unique this character's voice is, but if this is a real person, I think it would have sounded a lot better if they just talked normally with a light robotic effect slapped over top. The full stop sentences with random pitch shifts is very off-putting and makes it hard to pay attention to what they're saying. Hey, you've been to the story section and my thoughts on it. I won't be covering the spoilers in depth, but if you would like to avoid them, skip ahead to the positive and negative section below. Ready? Okay. You play a helmsman named Daniel, who awakens alone aboard his submarine with the sole mission to revive Colony 1265, an abandoned deep-sea mining and research facility which took a deadly turn, now forcing us to reactivate the 7 systems scattered across the ocean floor, with each providing a closer look at the truth of what happened. Before we get into my opinion, please take it with a grain of salt if you're watching this in the distant future. After completing this review, I learned that the developer has realized his story needed work and has been working tirelessly to rewrite, add, and develop a much better one. So this opinion will possibly become irrelevant once that's done. Now the story is told through the facilities, cutscenes, encounters, and voice memos I mentioned earlier. The storyline has a lot of potential, however it was executed quite poorly. If the game kept away from a narrative-driven experience and left it up to full interpretation with more context clues scattered around, I think they might have been better off. The cutscenes and memos felt quite random and sometimes unconnected from what the story was trying to be. It didn't help I lost most of my interest halfway through as I just couldn't follow what was going on well enough to understand the full picture. The ending was quite abrupt and provided little context of what just happened. I will say I love how it ended poorly as we need more true bad endings in gaming. But what got my character to this position in the first place? Why are we doing what we're doing? Where do these monsters come from, and why am I seeing the things I'm seeing? I'm sure some of these questions might have had answers in the memos, but my little brain just couldn't connect the dots. As mentioned before, there are a total of 4 achievements, all of which took me exactly an hour to obtain, with a single playthrough also taking an hour. I usually don't mention the ones handed to you just by playing, however they all are. So let's make this quick and start with Let There Be Light, which is simply activating the generator inside your submarine. No More Breaches is to fix the single hole right beside the generator inside your submarine. That was easy, is to complete the first facility, turn it on, and then walk back inside your submarine. The hardest achievement award will be going to One More Try, which is to simply die. This was the hardest achievement because if I didn't randomly slip off a ladder to my demise, I would have never gotten it until my second playthrough. Now if it's not obvious, these achievements are insanely easy to obtain and extremely disappointing. If you're looking for a quick hunt to just add to your list, there's that, but there are so many missed opportunities to include more interesting ones. A few examples could be like an achievement for completing every unique base, collecting and listening to all the memos, reading every cryptic message, extinguishing all the bodies, finding all the jellyfish, dying in each unique way, surviving a crash, maybe with over 3 holes, completing the game under an hour. The list just keeps going on. Feel free to use any of these ideas, but if you do, I would like to see my name sketched into the submarine as a little Easter egg. That'd be pretty cute. Now let's go over some of the positives. Starting with, the game is insanely immersive and has a beautiful low poly aesthetic. It's a unique and interesting take on the Iron Lung inspired genre. The level design is incredibly well thought out. The atmospheric jump scares are all well crafted, and the game overall is a smooth experience. As for the negatives, the story feels rushed and rough around the edges. The AI voice can be a bit bothersome. There's no effort put into creative achievements, and the game is quite short if you don't struggle with it. In conclusion, Helldive is a short, narrative-driven, first-person, psychological horror game, but would I recommend it? Well, Helldive is currently available for 11 Canadian doll hairs, or your regional equivalent, only on the Steam storefront. Now, I think this game has a lot of potential, and it frustrates me to see it not being fully utilized. I love how unique this experience is, but there's just too many missed opportunities. I hope with time it'll become so much more. It's currently classified as a full release, but I think it's fair to label it under early access, at least until the story is remastered and it's exactly where the developers want it to be. That all being said, I had a blast and much enjoyed the entire experience. If you want to go in raw, I recommend it, but it wouldn't hurt to wait until the game is fully polished. Helldive. 4.5 out of 6. Once again, a huge thanks to Teacup Games for giving me the opportunity to review this gem. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. Let me know your thoughts down below, or what game I should complete next. Subscribe so you never miss a video, and until next time, take care.